Welcome back, Lincoln currency. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the year is 1981. Gasoline smells still linger heavy at the service stations from the last big fuel crisis. Ronald Reagan has just taken the oath of office as president, and in pockets, purses, and desk drawers across America, a tiny copper disc quietly passes from hand to hand. It's only a penny, worth a single cent, but it's the kind of coin that sees more handshakes than a politician on election day. That coin is the 1981 Lincoln Memorial Cent, a simple, humble piece of money that has no idea it's about to become part of numismatic conversations for decades to come. Back then it was just the smallest denomination in everyday circulation, but now, it's a bridge between eras, a marker of economic shifts, and for some collectors, a treasure worth far more than its face value. In 1981, the United States Mint was still striking pennies from an alloy of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This composition gave the coin a warm reddish-brown color when new, the kind of sheen that caught light like a sunset. Each one weighed 3.11 grams, light enough to feel like nothing in your hand but substantial enough to clink in a satisfying way when a handful was dropped into a coin jar. The diameter was a neat 19 millimeters, and the edge was plain, no reading, no decorative milling, just the smooth contour of a coin that had been designed for function, not flash. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln gazes to the right, his portrait originally crafted in 1909 by sculptor Victor David Brenner to commemorate the centennial of Lincoln's birth. By 1981, this portrait had been in service for over 70 years, enduring countless political changes and minting innovations, yet remaining as timeless as the man it honored. Above Lincoln's head arcs the inscription, "In God We Trust," a national motto that had been standard on American coins for decades. To his left sits the word, "Liberty," balancing the design. To his right, near the rim, is the date, 1981, sometimes accompanied by a tiny D for Denver or S for San Francisco, though most from the Philadelphia Mint bore no mint mark at all. Turn the coin over and the reverse reveals the Lincoln Memorial in precise miniature, designed by Frank Gasparo. Every column, every stair, every shadow is there, carefully engraved so that even the statue of Lincoln inside the memorial can be glimpsed if the strike is sharp enough and the coin is unworn. Above the memorial arcs the words, "United States of America," beneath which sits the Latin phrase, "E pluribus unum," meaning, "out of many, one." Below the building, in bold capitals, is the denomination, 1 cent. Tucked discreetly to the right of the memorial's base are the initials, FG, for Gasparo, the artist. At the time, this design was not considered exotic or special. It was the standard face of the penny since 1959. But to understand why 1981 would become significant, you have to appreciate the economics of coin production in that period. Copper prices were climbing, not just in the United States but globally. The value of the metal inside each penny was creeping toward and eventually exceeding the coin's face value, making it increasingly expensive for the government to mint them. In the halls of the U.S. Mint, discussions were already underway about changing the penny's composition to something less costly, and in 1982, that change would finally happen, switching to a copper-plated zinc core. This meant that the 1981 penny was one of the last full years where every circulating 1-cent coin was struck in nearly solid copper, a detail that would later give these coins a certain nostalgic and tangible value to collectors. Mintage numbers for 1981 were staggering. The Philadelphia Mint struck billions of pennies without a mint mark, Denver followed with billions more carrying the D, and San Francisco focused on proof coins, made with highly polished dies and carefully handled to produce mirror-like fields and frosted designs. These proof coins were sold directly to collectors, never intended for general circulation. For the average American in 1981, the penny was just part of daily life. It bought bubble gum, candy, and could be found in change from payphones, vending machines, and corner stores. People didn't hoard them, didn't examine them under magnification, unless they were part of the small, dedicated community of coin enthusiasts. But for collectors, even then, condition was everything. A penny fresh from the mint, with its full luster intact and no marks from handling, was worth holding onto. And in rare instances, a coin with an unusual error, like a doubled die, off-center strike, or wrong planchet, could command far more than face value. In those days, few could predict that some 1981 cents, in pristine condition, would one day sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. What's fascinating is that this transformation from pocket change to prized collectible didn't happen overnight. It was slow, like copper tarnishing over time. Each passing year saw more of these coins pulled from circulation, either worn down beyond collector interest or set aside by sharp-eyed individuals. By the time decades had passed, finding a truly flawless example had become a challenge. This scarcity in top condition is one of the key reasons high-grade 1981 cents can be so valuable today. Over the years, collectors began to notice subtle but important differences in certain 1981 pennies. These variations weren't just from the mint marks but also from the dies themselves. At the San Francisco Mint, where proof coins were struck, two distinct varieties emerged, what we now call Type 1 and Type 2 proofs. Type 1 had a filled S mint mark, the curves of the letter appearing more bulbous and less sharply defined. Type 2, in contrast, had a clear, sharp S mint mark with delicate, refined serifs. At the time, the difference seemed almost trivial, but decades later, it became a point of excitement for collectors. The Type 2 variety, being scarcer, would climb in value significantly, especially in perfect proof condition. These proof coins, struck on specially prepared planchets and handled with extreme care, were never meant for circulation. Each was struck multiple times to ensure crisp, detailed reliefs and mirror-like fields. They were sold in annual proof sets, often tucked away in storage boxes or safety deposit boxes. When found today in perfect grades, PR69 or the almost mythical PR70, they can fetch prices in the hundreds or even thousands, depending on the variety. Meanwhile, business strike coins from Philadelphia and Denver were made for everyday transactions. Most were handled immediately after minting, jostling in bags, colliding with one another, acquiring tiny contact marks before even leaving the mint. This is why uncirculated examples, especially those graded MS67 or higher, are so scarce. The grading scale, developed by the Sheldon system, runs from 1, barely identifiable, to 70, perfect. A 1981 penny graded MS65 is considered gem quality. But an MS68 RD, red designation meaning full original copper color without spotting, is a rarity that has driven intense bidding wars among collectors. Auction history tells its own story. In one instance, a 1981 no-mint mark cent graded MS68 RD sold for around $3,000 on eBay. A Denver minted example in MS67 Plus red once fetched over $5,000 at heritage auctions. San Francisco's PR70 Type 1 proof sold for more than $8,000, astonishing for a coin with a face value of a single cent. These numbers are impressive, but they also fuel exaggerated tales in less reputable corners of the internet. That's where we encounter the myth of the $432 million penny. The story usually circulates in sensational headlines or clickbait videos, claiming that a single ordinary-looking 1981 penny sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. The reality, of course, is far less dramatic. No penny, not even the rarest 1981 example, has ever approached anything remotely close to that figure. These inflated numbers are either satirical, deliberately misleading, or born from misunderstanding. The truth is that the market for coins, while capable of producing impressive sales, is still grounded in collector demand, rarity, and condition. Even the most extraordinary 1981 penny could not command hundreds of millions. Such sums are reserved for unique artifacts like famous paintings or historically pivotal treasures. Still, myths have power. They draw people into the hobby, prompting them to search their change jars and pocket lint for potential treasures. And in a way, that curiosity is a gift to numismatics. Every person who checks their coins might stumble upon something special, not $432 million special, but perhaps hundreds or thousands of dollars, which is nothing to dismiss. Part of what makes the 1981 penny fascinating is that it sits right on the cusp of change in U.S. coinage history. After 1982, the transition to copper-plated zinc altered not only the weight and feel of the coin but also its sound. Drop a copper penny on a tabletop, and you hear a warm, ringing tone. Drop a post-1982 zinc penny, and you get a duller, shorter clink. This difference is so distinct that seasoned collectors can often identify a copper penny by sound alone. That shift in metal composition also had broader economic implications. The mint, facing the reality that it was costing more than 1 cent to make a penny, had to act. Copper prices had been rising steadily, and the thought of producing billions of coins at a loss was unsustainable. By switching to zinc cores plated with a thin layer of copper, production costs were reduced, though even today the penny costs more to produce than its face value. But for collectors, those pre-1982 copper cents, including all the 1981 issues, carry an intrinsic value above their face. The metal content alone can be worth more than 1 cent, though melting them for profit remains illegal in the United States. As time went on, another factor emerged to shape the desirability of 1981 pennies: condition scarcity. Out of the billions minted, only a tiny fraction survived without the scratches, nicks, or spots that inevitably develop over decades in circulation. High-grade survivors are the true standouts, and the higher the grade, the steeper the value climb. It's here that you begin to understand the logic behind those 4- and 5-figure auction prices, not myth, but market. To truly appreciate why some 1981 pennies stand out from the billions that rolled off the presses, you need to step inside the mint, at least in your imagination. Picture massive coining presses, each weighing several tons, operating with a rhythmic thunder that sends vibrations through the concrete floors. Copper planchets, small blank discs, are fed into hoppers, sorted, and guided into position between 2 dies. The upper die, called the hammer die, comes down with immense pressure, striking the blank against the lower die, or anvil die. In an instant, the plain metal is transformed into a finished penny, complete with Lincoln's profile on one side and the Lincoln Memorial on the other. In 1981, the Philadelphia and Denver mints were producing pennies at staggering speeds, turning out thousands of coins per minute. With such high-volume production, perfection was the goal, but occasional errors were inevitable. These mistakes, when preserved and discovered, can become some of the most sought-after coins in the numismatic world. One type of error collectors seek in 1981 pennies is the doubled die. This occurs when the working die itself carries a doubled image, because of a misalignment during the hubbing process, when the design is impressed into the die. On a doubled die obverse, for example, you might see slight but distinct doubling of the date, the letters in Liberty, or In God We Trust. On the reverse, doubling can sometimes appear on the letters of 1 cent, or the lines of the Lincoln Memorial. Strong doubled dies are rare and valuable, while minor ones may fetch only a modest premium. Another variety is the off-center strike. This happens when the planchet is not properly seated between the dies, causing part of the design to be missing and an unstruck blank crescent of metal to remain. The more off-center the strike, while still showing the date and mint mark, the more valuable the error can be. Then there's the broad strike error, where the retaining collar that shapes the coin's edge fails to engage, allowing the metal to expand outward when struck. Broad-struck coins appear slightly larger in diameter and have no rim, giving them a strange, stretched appearance. Wrong planchet errors are also intriguing. Occasionally, a planchet intended for another denomination slips into the penny press. For example, a 1981 penny struck on a dime planchet would be smaller, lighter, and have a silvery appearance due to the dime's copper-nickel composition. Such wrong planchet errors are scarce and can be worth hundreds or even thousands, depending on condition and demand. Die cracks and die breaks, raised lines or blobs on the finished coin, occur when the dies themselves develop fractures from repeated use. In 1981, with billions of strikes happening, die fatigue was inevitable. While minor cracks are common and not particularly valuable, dramatic die breaks, sometimes called cuds, can attract collector interest. The process of catching these errors back in 1981 was not as technologically advanced as today. Quality control teams visually inspected coins, but given the massive output, many flawed coins slipped through undetected into bags and were shipped to banks nationwide. This is why they occasionally surface today in coin rolls or even pocket change, decades after they were minted. For the collector, spotting these varieties requires patience, a good magnifying glass or loupe, and a trained eye. The details are often subtle, and lighting is key. Tilting the coin under a bright lamp can reveal doubling or raised lines invisible in normal light. Some enthusiasts go further, photographing coins at high magnification to document anomalies for grading and certification. Certification, in fact, plays a huge role in determining market value for these errors and varieties. Professional grading services like PCGS or NGC evaluate not just the condition of the coin but also the authenticity of the error. A raw coin with what appears to be doubling might sell for a modest sum, but the same coin in a certified holder labeled double die verse can multiply in value instantly. Beyond errors, 1981 is also remembered for being the final complete year of the copper cent before the composition change in 1982. That transition means every 1981 penny is inherently part of the last of the copper era group, a fact that gives even common examples a nostalgic appeal. Some collectors go as far as building complete date and mint mark sets of pre-1982 copper cents, including all possible varieties. For them, the 1981 issue is a keystone, marking the end of a tradition that began in 1909 with the introduction of the Lincoln cent. In the larger narrative of U.S. coinage, these pennies tell a story not just of Abraham Lincoln's enduring image but of an economy under pressure, a mint adapting to changing costs, and a public largely unaware that their pocket change was about to undergo a fundamental transformation. When you talk to serious coin collectors about 1981 pennies, you quickly realize that finding a valuable one is not simply a matter of luck, it's a blend of method, patience, and knowledge. While it's true that some extraordinary finds have been made by accident, most high-grade examples and rare varieties are unearthed through deliberate searching. Roll hunting is one of the most popular methods. Collectors purchase rolls of pennies from banks, sometimes dozens or even hundreds at a time, and go through each coin under good lighting, looking for high-grade examples, rare varieties, or interesting errors. For the 1981 penny, roll hunters focus on coins that retain full original red luster, show no significant marks, and have sharp, clear strikes. If they come across proof-like surfaces or unusual details, they set them aside for closer inspection. Over time, a keen-eyed collector learns to spot differences that most people overlook. Then there's estate and garage sale hunting. Old jars of change, tucked away for decades, sometimes contain coins that were put aside unintentionally, maybe because they were shiny, maybe because a child thought they looked different, maybe just because they were the last coins in someone's pocket before the jar started filling. In these forgotten stashes, it's possible to find uncirculated 1981 cents that haven't been worn by decades of circulation. Coin shows and dealer inventories offer another avenue. Dealers often have boxes of uncirculated copper cents for sale at modest premiums, and flipping through these can sometimes yield coins worth submitting to a grading service. It's a bit like sifting through sand for gold. You might go through hundreds to find one that meets the exacting standards of a top-tier grade. The grading itself is a fascinating and often nerve-wracking process. A collector decides to send a coin to PCGS, NGC, or ANAX, carefully packing it in a protective holder and filling out paperwork that describes the coin. Weeks later, the coin returns in a sealed plastic slab, labeled with its grade and any noted varieties or errors. That grade can mean the difference between a coin worth a few dollars and one worth hundreds, or even thousands. Auction psychology is another part of the equation. When a rare or high-grade 1981 penny comes to auction, especially if it has an MS68 RD grade or a top-ranked proof designation, the bidding can become fierce. Collectors compete not just for the coin itself, but for the prestige of owning one of the finest known examples. The auctioneer's voice rises, the tension builds, and with each incremental bid, the final price climbs. Sometimes the emotional thrill of competition pushes prices beyond what anyone might expect in a quiet, private sale. And then there's the cultural mystique. Coins have a way of capturing the imagination, especially when the story hints at a hidden fortune in plain sight. Stories circulate online about pennies worth thousands, or even the absurd claim of a 1981 penny worth $432 million. While that number is pure fantasy, it feeds into the human love for treasure hunts. We like to believe that something ordinary, a coin in your pocket, a jar of change on your shelf, could secretly be extraordinary. This belief isn't entirely unfounded. While number 1981 penny will make you a billionaire, a single high-grade example or rare error could indeed bring in enough money to pay a month's rent, buy a new computer, or fund part of a vacation. That potential is what keeps people looking. There's also a deep emotional connection to coins like the 1981 cent. For some collectors, it's not just about monetary value, it's about holding a piece of their own past. People who were children in the early 1980s remember these pennies as part of their allowance, the coins they used in arcade machines, or the change they counted for candy at the corner store. Owning a perfect example is like owning a tiny time capsule, untouched by the decades that have passed. For others, the connection is historical. They think about 1981 as a turning point in U.S. coinage, the last full year of copper pennies, and see each coin as a tangible artifact from that economic moment. The blend of personal nostalgia, historical significance, and the thrill of the hunt is what keeps the 1981 penny relevant in the collecting world, even among billions of other coins. And while the reality of the market says these coins won't turn into nine-figure treasures, the stories, the hunts, and the small victories in finding something truly special keep the legend alive. The 1981 penny sits in an unusual place in American numismatic history, too young to be an antique, too old to be modern, and yet carrying the DNA of a century's worth of tradition. For over 70 years before it, the Lincoln cent had been a constant companion to the nation's daily life, changing only in the image on its reverse. By 1981, the memorial design had already stood for more than 2 decades, quietly marking the back of billions of coins. The transition that would come in 1982 wasn't just about metal. It was about closing the door on a chapter of American coinage that had lasted generations. When you hold a 1981 penny, you're holding the echo of that chapter's final year, a last breath before the shift to lighter, cheaper zinc cores. To the untrained eye, it's a small, almost weightless object, something so common you might not even look at it. But to a collector, the way light dances off the copper surface, the sharpness of Lincoln's profile, the clean rims and precise lettering, these are the details that matter. Each one tells you how the coin has traveled through time. Some have been worn down by thousands of transactions, their surfaces dulled and smoothed until Lincoln's cheekbones barely rise above the field. Others have somehow survived untouched, stored away in mint rolls, forgotten in safe deposit boxes, or protected in proof sets from the moment they left the mint. The market for 1981 pennies reflects this divide. Common circulated examples trade hands for their face value. A cent uncirculated examples with minor marks might fetch a small premium. But the finest known specimens, certified by professional grading services, can ignite bidding wars that push their prices into the thousands. And then there are the proof coins, mirrored surfaces so reflective you can see your face in them, devices so frosted they seem sculpted from pale light. In the right grade, especially in the rarer Type 2 variety, these proofs have sold for enough to make a collector's heart race. Auction houses know this, and they stage their presentations like theater. The catalog photos are immaculate, the lighting capturing every curve of the design. The description reads like a love letter to the coin, noting its technical perfection, its historical importance, and its place in the registry rankings. Bidders arrive ready not just to buy, but to win. In that moment, a 1-cent coin becomes something far greater, a trophy, a piece of history, a statement of prestige. But outside the auction hall, in the everyday world, the myths keep swirling. The internet is filled with breathless headlines. Check your change! This penny could be worth $432 million. The figure is pure fiction, a number chosen to shock and pull in clicks. Yet the underlying message, that there could be treasure hiding in your pocket, has just enough truth to keep people searching. It's human nature to dream of unexpected fortune. And maybe that's the real magic of the 1981 penny. It's not the possibility of a multi-million-dollar windfall. It's the idea that something ordinary can, under the right conditions, be extraordinary. That a coin made for the smallest of transactions could become a prized possession, not for its purchasing power but for its story. Stories, after all, are what give coins their real value. A perfect 1981 penny isn't just metal, it's the tale of the year it was struck, the design that connects it to Lincoln himself, the economic forces that shaped its composition, the minting errors that made some of its siblings unique, and the decades it survived before finding its way into the hands of someone who recognized its worth. That's the reason people keep jars of change in their homes, and the reason collectors still sift through rolls of pennies. It's the thrill of possibility, the satisfaction of discovery, and the quiet pride in knowing you've preserved something worth keeping. And so the 1981 penny remains, humble, common, yet capable of surprising even the most experienced numismatists. It's a coin that carries the weight of history in just 3.11 grams, a reminder that sometimes, the smallest things hold the richest stories. When you drop it into your palm, you're not just holding a piece of copper, you're holding a chapter of America's past, an object that has lived through 4 decades, survived countless hands, and now has the potential to live on in the careful stewardship of a collector who knows exactly what they're looking at. And maybe, just maybe, that's worth more than all the myths and million-dollar headlines in the world. Imagine you're sitting at a desk with a small felt mat in front of you, a desk lamp casting warm light across the surface. In your hand, a simple, circular coin rests between your fingers, the 1981 Lincoln Memorial cent. It's been resting in a coin flip for protection, and now you gently slide it out, holding it by the edges so your fingertips never touch the surface. You raise your magnifier to your eye, bringing the obverse into crisp focus. The first thing you notice is the color, the unmistakable rich red of copper and high preservation. Light sweeps across Lincoln's profile, highlighting the precise engraving of his hair, each strand individually sculpted in miniature. The bow tie under his chin is sharp, the folds of his collar perfectly defined. His gaze is steady, forward, unyielding, as though he's looking not just through history but into the future. Above him, the words "I in God we trust" arc gracefully, the letters bold and unbroken. Each T has sharp crossbars, each curve of the S is smooth and complete. The word Liberty, to the left of Lincoln, stands tall and even, its spacing flawless. You pause at the date, 1981, each number raised cleanly from the field, no smearing, no doubling, no signs of wear. If there's a mint mark, it sits just beneath the date, a D for Denver, a perfect oval shape with its vertical stem sharp and distinct, or perhaps an S for San Francisco, its curves perfectly proportioned, with no signs of blurring. You tilt the coin slightly, letting the light glide across its surface. Any imperfections, tiny contact marks, spots, or hairline scratches, would reveal themselves here, but on this coin, the fields are pristine. They mirror the light in a way that makes the design seem to float above them. Now you flip the coin over, revealing the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial in astonishing detail. You start at the top, reading United States of America in its dignified serif font. The letters are deeply struck, each one crisp from base to top. Below that, the motto E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one, sits in a smaller font, perfectly centered above the memorial. Then your eye moves to the heart of the design, the memorial itself. The roofline is straight and solid, the triangular pediment sharply defined. Every column stands perfectly vertical, with the spaces between them clean and free of weakness. Between the central columns, if you look closely enough, you can actually see the tiny seated statue of Lincoln, his outline barely larger than the tip of a sewing needle. The stairs leading up to the memorial are layered with precision, each step distinct. On the right side near the base, the tiny initials FG, Frank Gasparo, stand as a quiet signature of the artist. Below, 1 cent stretches across the bottom in bold capital letters. Each stroke of the letters is thick, free of flattening or wear. The rims of the coin form a perfect circle, framing the design without nicks or dents. You examine the edge, smooth and plain, no reading, no damage from years of handling. Under magnification, you can see the fine texture of the copper surface, tiny crystalline patterns that catch the light differently depending on the angle. This is where the designation, red, comes from in grading, a coin that has retained nearly all of its original copper coloration without turning brown from oxidation. You take a deep breath and set the coin down gently. In this moment, it's not just a penny, it's a preserved work of miniature art, a survivor of an era when each cent carried more in metal value than in face value. You realize that most people will never notice these details, will never stop to examine the microsculpture of Lincoln's hair or the hidden statue inside the memorial. But for those who do, this level of craftsmanship transforms the ordinary into something unforgettable. And it's that transformation, the leap from a cent to a story, that keeps the 1981 penny alive in the hearts of collectors. Every time someone picks one up and really looks, there's a chance they'll see it not as loose change, but as a time traveler from 1981, carrying the memory of the year in which it was struck. In that way, even without the myths or exaggerated price tags, this small copper coin achieves something remarkable. It becomes priceless in the mind of the person holding it. Picture this. Somewhere right now, in a coffee shop cash register, in the bottom of a purse, in a child's piggy bank, there could be a 1981 penny that hasn't seen the light of day in decades. Maybe it sat quietly at the back of a drawer, passed over countless times because it looked like any other cent. Maybe it's been through 1,000 small transactions, buying gum, paying for parking, handed back as change for a cold soda on a hot summer day. Each one was a chapter in its story, but it has survived all those years without losing the very details that make it extraordinary. And the truth is, no one can know when they'll come across one of these small treasures. It could be in the change you get from the corner store tomorrow. It could be in a dusty coin jar you inherited from a relative. It could even be in that old box in the attic you've been meaning to clean out for years. That's the beauty of the hunt. It's not always about chasing something rare across the globe. Sometimes, it's about realizing that history is already in your hands. You just have to look. The 1981 penny isn't just a coin, it's a bridge between the old and the new. The last full year of copper cents. The final moment before a fundamental change in American coinage. A symbol of an era when the clink of solid metal was part of daily life, when the penny still had weight both in your hand and in the economy. And whether you're a seasoned numismatist or just someone with a spark of curiosity, that history is yours to keep, if you choose to see it. Yes, the headlines will tell you wild tales, coins worth hundreds of millions of dollars, instant fortunes hiding in plain sight. The reality may be quieter, but it's no less exciting. Because the real value isn't just in the auction hammer's final price, it's in the connection you feel when you hold a coin and know where it came from, when you understand its story, and when you realize that story survived against the odds. So here's the invitation: check your change. Look closely. Take the time to notice the details most people ignore. Because one day, you might find that 1981 penny with the flawless strike, the untouched copper surface, the tiny statue of Lincoln still standing proudly between the columns. And when you do, you'll feel something no exaggerated price tag can give you. You'll feel like you've caught a piece of history before it's slipped away. That's why collectors keep searching, why we keep telling these stories, why the humble 1981 penny continues to shine brighter than its face value suggests. Not because it's guaranteed to make you rich, but because it reminds us of something we often forget, that even the smallest things can carry the heaviest weight and meaning. And maybe that's worth more than any number you could ever put on it. Imagine the year is 1981. Inside the U.S. Mint, the sound is relentless, a deep, mechanical rhythm as presses strike planchets into coins with precise, calculated force. Each blank disc of copper, weighing 3.11 grams, is fed into the press. In a split second, the dies come together with tens of tons of pressure, and what was once a blank becomes a 1981 Lincoln cent. The obverse shows Abraham Lincoln's dignified profile, the reverse reveals the Lincoln Memorial in sharp, architectural detail. The coin is ejected, sliding down into a collection bin, joining thousands of others just like it. They clink and scrape against each other, tiny collisions that leave the faintest marks on their fresh surfaces. From here, they begin their journey. Some are boxed and shipped directly to banks in heavy canvas bags. Others are rolled into paper wrappers, bound for businesses and payrolls. Maybe your coin left the Philadelphia Mint in the spring, passed to a bank in a small Midwestern town, then into the hands of a store clerk who dropped it into a registered drawer. From there, it could have gone anywhere, across the country in the pocket of a traveling salesman, to the other side of the world in the change given to a tourist, or simply to the candy counter down the street. Every time it changes hands, its surface tells the story: tiny scratches, spots of oxidation, softening of the highest points on Lincoln's cheek and jaw. Years pass. 1,000 transactions blur together. It might lie forgotten in a coin jar, waiting for decades in the quiet darkness of a cupboard. Or it could keep moving, bouncing from wallet to cash register to coin tray in an endless loop. Some 1981 pennies didn't travel far at all. They were plucked from circulation almost immediately by people who understood what they were. They noticed the bright, flawless luster, the sharp strike, the fully red copper surfaces. These were tucked away in coin flips or mint rolls, stored carefully in drawers or safety deposit boxes, protected from the wear of everyday commerce. Decades later, those untouched examples are the ones that stun collectors, the ones that bring big money at auction. But the rest? They're still out there. In jars. In pockets. In forgotten bank rolls and storage units and attics. The life of a 1981 penny is as unpredictable as it is fascinating. Some were lost entirely, dropped in fields, washed away in rain, buried in dirt where they will rest until discovered by a metal detectorist years or even centuries later. Others traveled into foreign lands, carried overseas by American travelers, left in tip jars in cafes thousands of miles from the nearest U.S. bank. And there are the ones that lived quiet lives in collections without fanfare, tucked into albums where their copper has darkened slightly but their details remain. They may never see the inside of an auction hall, but they're cherished all the same. When you think about it, every single surviving 1981 penny is a miniature time capsule. Its surfaces record not only its design, but every interaction it's had since leaving the mint. Each nick, each faint fingerprint, each shade of toning is a clue to where it's been. And somewhere, among the billions made, there are still those rare survivors in pristine condition, coins that have beaten the odds and remain as sharp as the day they were struck. Those are the ones that command respect, that spark bidding wars, that make collectors' hearts race when they spot them under the bright lights of an auction display. But perhaps the most incredible thing is this: unlike rare art locked away in museums or priceless jewels in vaults, the 1981 penny still roams the world in plain sight. Anyone can find one. You don't need permission, you don't need a ticket, you don't even need to spend money to search. All you need is curiosity, patience, and a sharp eye. And that's why this little coin continues to captivate after all these years. Somewhere out there is a 1981 penny that's been waiting for decades for someone to notice it. It could be in the next handful of change you receive. It could be the one rolling across your kitchen table right now. The question is, will you recognize it when you see it? Somewhere in the United States right now, there's a penny from 1981 that hasn't been touched in 40 years. Maybe it's stuck between couch cushions in a living room where the furniture hasn't been moved since the early 90s. Maybe it's resting in the coin slot of a vending machine that's been out of service for decades, forgotten in the back of a warehouse. Or maybe, just maybe, it's buried in a jar of loose change on a shelf in your own home, a jar you've walked past 100 times without ever opening. Think about that for a second. Every one of those coins is a tiny time capsule. Every one has traveled a unique path, been in places you'll never know, passed through hands you'll never meet. The 1981 penny in particular carries the quiet tension of being the last of its kind. It's like a final photograph taken before the curtain drops, a snapshot of an era that ended abruptly when the mint shifted to zinc in 1982. The metal is part of the story, but it's not the whole story. It's also about the way the coin feels, slightly heavier than what came after, with a faintly warmer tone in the copper that catches light differently. The sound is different too. Drop a 1981 copper cent onto a wooden table, and it sings with a deeper ring than a modern zinc penny. To most people, that's background noise. To collectors, it's a signal, like hearing the first notes of a song you've loved your whole life. But here's where the magic really happens, when someone decides to look closer. Maybe they're just killing time, maybe they're searching intentionally. The magnifier comes out, the light is adjusted, and suddenly an everyday object transforms before their eyes. They see the clean strike, the untouched luster, the precise spacing of the date, the mint mark sitting proudly beneath it. They notice the memorial's columns, the hidden statue of Lincoln, the sculptor's initials tucked away in the design. And in that moment, the coin stops being just a penny. It becomes a survivor, a witness, a story frozen in copper. This is the moment collectors live for, the quiet rush when a piece of history reveals itself in their hands. And that's why the 1981 penny, despite being one of the most common coins of its year, continues to hold this strange magnetic pull. Because in a world where so much is digital, disposable, and forgotten, here's something physical, permanent, and tied directly to the fabric of a country's past. And it could be sitting in your change right now. All you have to do is notice. So maybe the 1981 penny isn't going to make you $432 million. Maybe it won't even make you $432. But it has the power to give you something much rarer: connection. Connection to a year when copper still rang in your palm with a certain weight, when Lincoln's memorial still stood proudly on the reverse, when the United States Mint was unknowingly producing the last full year of coins in this composition. Connection to every person who's ever held one, spent one, saved one, or studied one. And perhaps most importantly, connection to the idea that even in our fast-moving, disposable world, some things endure. That's the story of the 1981 penny. It's a story worth telling, worth holding, and for some, worth chasing. Because somewhere out there, maybe in a jar on your shelf or in the till at the gas station, one of these coins is waiting for you to notice it. And when you do, when you take that moment to look, to see, to appreciate, you'll understand why collectors will always believe in the magic of a coin, no matter its denomination. After all, history doesn't care about face value. It cares about survival, about memory, about the stories we pass down. And in that way, this little copper coin will outlive us all, quietly shining in the hands of whoever finds it next.